Good morning. Welcome to today's press conference. Bienvenue à la conférence de presse d'aujourd'hui. We'll now turn to the Deputy Prime Minister.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. Late last night, Bill C-30, the legislation that enacts many important measures in our recent budget, was adopted by the Senate and received royal assent. This is a hugely important step forward for the country, for our economic recovery, and for Canadian workers. I'd like to thank all senators for their hard work and for their support. Our recovery plan is about finishing the fight against COVID and healing the wounds of the COVID recession. It is a plan to ensure a full, fast, and fair recovery, and it's a plan for jobs and economic growth. Low-income workers are among those Canadians who have been hit hardest by the pandemic. Many are essential frontline workers. Many faced layoffs, greatly reduced hours, or significant infection risks at work. Many of them are racialized or new Canadians. And too often, these hard-working Canadians live below the poverty line, including full-time workers earning the minimum wage. No one working full-time in our country should live in poverty. So I'm very pleased to announce today a historic expansion of the Canada Workers Benefit. We are expanding the Canada Workers Benefit to help 1 million hardworking, low-income Canadians who did not previously qualify for this support. This move will put real money up to $1,400 for single workers and $2,400 for families into the pockets of nearly 1 million working Canadians. We're doing this by raising the threshold for eligibility. If you are a single Canadian worker earning up to $32,244, a single earner family earning up to $42,197, or a dual earner family earning up to $56,197, you will now receive this support through your tax refund. We're also raising the income threshold for eligibility for the maximum benefit. This means that more hardworking Canadians will get the maximum support from this benefit. This is support that will have real, tangible benefits for workers across the country. A total of 3.2 million Canadians will now be eligible for the Canada Workers Benefit. And this expansion will help lift 100,000 Canadians out of poverty. Notre gouvernement sait que la relance inclusive de notre pays doit aussi être une relance féministe. Trop souvent, les prestations qui reposent sur le revenu familial découragent les salaires secondaires des ménages à retourner au travail. Et la plupart du temps, c'est la femme qui est la salariée secondaire dans une famille. Il faut absolument que ces travailleuses compétentes participent à la création d'une main-d'œuvre forte et à une relance économique robuste pour tous. So, to break down another barrier to women's workforce participation, our changes will now allow secondary earners to exclude up to $14,000 of their working income when calculating the support they can receive under the Canada Workers Benefit. That means that the first $14,000 a second income earner brings home will not reduce her family's eligibility for the Canada Workers Benefit. This will make more families eligible for this support and ensure women are a central part of Canada's strong and long-lasting economic recovery. Low-income workers have done so much of the essential work we all relied on to get through this pandemic. They are the cleaners, the store clerks, the delivery workers, the personal care providers who have allowed us all to keep going and stay safe during the pandemic. Ils méritent un salaire minimum juste. L'adoption du budget fera aussi en sorte qu'on aura un nouveau salaire minimum fédéral de 15 $ à l'heure qui va augmenter avec l'inflation. Pendant le retour en force de notre économie, nous mettons des mesures en place pour que tous les travailleurs canadiens puissent contribuer à la relance de notre pays et qu'on puisse bâtir une économie plus juste, plus résiliente et plus inclusive. Merci beaucoup. Et maintenant, je passe la parole à ma chère collègue dans le ministère des Finances, Mona Fortier. Mona, à toi la parole.
Merci, Chrystia. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Merci d'être avec nous en si grand nombre aujourd'hui. And before I continue, I want to recognize that I am joining you from my office at Finance Canada, which is on the traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. Alors, je voudrais commencer par ceci. La pandémie a mis en lumière ce que nous savions déjà. Trop de Canadiennes et Canadiens occupent des emplois précaires et ont à peine de quoi joindre les deux bouts à la fin de chaque mois. Et plusieurs de ces travailleurs sont des femmes, des Autochtones, des jeunes, des nouveaux Canadiens, des Canadiens racisés et des Canadiens noirs. Et j'entends leurs histoires tous les jours quand je parle à des familles, à des travailleurs de partout au pays et dans ma communauté ici même, dans Ottawa-Valley. Des jeunes mères ont dû réévaluer leur situation professionnelle parce qu'elles avaient besoin de prendre soin de leurs enfants. Les nouveaux diplômés des universités, des collèges trouvent un emploi, mais souvent avec un faible salaire et dans des postes de première ligne en raison d'un marché du travail qui fonctionne au ralenti. Et trop de personnes noires, autochtones et racisées vivent encore sous le seuil de la pauvreté, même si elles travaillent très fort pour s'assurer de pouvoir nourrir leur famille et d'avoir un toit sûr au-dessus de leur tête. Et c'est pourquoi notre gouvernement élargit l'allocation canadienne pour les travailleurs afin d'aider environ 1 million de personnes de plus qui occupent des postes à faible salaire. This will help to lift 100,000 people out of poverty. Think about that. That is about the size of Brantford, Ontario. It means more money in workers' pockets. For example, as a result of the enhancement, more workers with families will receive the maximum benefit of $2,400. Please know that our government is standing beside you, and we are doing everything in our power to support our communities and make sure we are poised for a resilient and inclusive economy. Notre gouvernement est à vos côtés et nous faisons tout ce qui est dans notre pouvoir pour soutenir nos communautés et nous assurer d'être prêts pour une économie résiliente et inclusive. Il s'agit d'une crise sanitaire, mais aussi d'une crise économique. Et notre gouvernement a agi rapidement pour que les familles, les travailleurs et les entreprises aient le soutien dont elles ont besoin pour continuer à avoir un chez-soi sûr et de la nourriture sur leur table. La situation a été très difficile, mais les Canadiens ont fait preuve de confiance et d'adaptabilité et nous en sortirons ensemble plus forts de l'autre côté avec une meilleure qualité de vie. Nous pouvons nous en sortir et nous le ferons ensemble. Thank you, merci, and I will now pass it over to my colleague and good friend, Minister Ing. Over to you, Mary.
Merci beaucoup, Mona. It's good to see you and Chrystia. Before I begin, let me acknowledge that I am joining you from the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Chippewa, and the Wendat peoples. For those of us who are settlers or immigrants to Canada, it's important to recognize that Indigenous peoples have always been here and that we all have a role to play in reconciliation. This work is especially important with the tragic and horrific confirmation of hundreds of children whose lives were taken at residential schools. And it's important to recognize that terrible legacy of residential schools and the role that we all can play in our ongoing reconciliation efforts moving forward. I'm really pleased to be here today, right after the Budget Implementation Act received royal assent. In this budget, we are taking decisive, responsible action for a strong recovery. As Minister Freeland just announced, with the expansion of the Canada Worker Benefit, which will lift over 100,000 Canadians out of poverty, Budget 2021 is built to support Canadians through this crisis and to thrive in the future. From action to lowering credit card fees to historic investments in digital and technology adoption, this is also the most small business-friendly budget in Canadian history. In this budget, we will extend critical emergency supports like the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy and the Canada Emergency Rent Subsidy to September. The Canada Recovery Hiring Program will be crucial to help small businesses hire back workers, hire new workers, and to recover stronger and faster. In this budget, we're making inclusive investments to support underrepresented entrepreneurs and businesses, including strengthening the Black Entrepreneurship Program and the Women's Entrepreneurship Strategy, and investments to support Indigenous entrepreneurs. We're also investing an additional $450 million over 5 years for a renewed venture capital catalyst initiative, which will leverage venture capital funding to support the growth and competitiveness of Canada's innovative companies. With the Canada Worker Benefit and all of the inclusive investments that we're making in Budget 2021, we're investing in Canadians, in our recovery, and in our long-term and competitiveness, creating 1 million jobs along the way. This is truly the significant budget in our nation's history. This is not 2009. We cannot wait a decade to recover from this COVID recession. Now is the time to lean in to build a more innovative, inclusive, and sustainable future. So with that, thank you very much, and we look forward to taking your questions.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister and Ministers. We will now turn to the phone for questions. It'll be one question, one follow-up. On se tourne maintenant au téléphone pour des questions. Ce sera une question et une question en suivi. Opérateur?
Thank you. Merci. Please press star 1 at this time if you have a question. S'il vous plaît, appuyez sur étoile 1 maintenant pour poser une question. There will be a brief pause while the participant register for questions. Il y aura un court délai pour permettre de vous enregistrer dans la file d'attente pour la période de questions. Thank you for your patience. Merci de patienter. La première question, the first question is from Catherine Lévesque, La Presse canadienne. Please go ahead, your line is open. Votre ligne est ouverte.
Oui, bonjour. Mes questions seront pour la ministre Freeland. Je voulais parler de C30 parce que là, ça prolonge l'aide au loyer, l'aide pandémique là, pour les gens de façon générale jusqu'au 25 septembre, si je ne me trompe pas. Je me demandais qu'est-ce qui arrive si cette aide se termine comme prévu à la fin du mois de septembre et qu'on est en élection à ce moment-là?
Merci pour la question. Et vous avez raison que avec cette loi, on a une garantie que l'aide pour les entreprises, la subvention salariale, la subvention pour le loyer et aussi la prestation canadienne d'urgence pour les travailleurs, toutes ces mesures seront en place jusqu'à 25 septembre. Il y a aussi une mesure très importante pour les entreprises qui, grâce à cette loi, commencera le 6 juin et continuera jusqu'à novembre. Et c'est l'aide pour les entreprises pour embaucher les nouveaux travailleurs. Et c'est une mesure très importante qui va vraiment aider à appuyer les entreprises pendant la reprise, qui va les encourager à donner des travail à des nouveaux travailleurs ou à donner plus de travail, plus d'heures aux travailleurs qui sont déjà là. Et cette aide continuera jusqu'à novembre. Vous avez demandé qu'est-ce qui se passera avec toutes ces mesures et les élections. Et je dois vous dire que ce n'est pas une question pour moi. Pour moi, la question fondamentale en ce qui concerne le soutien, l'appui pour les entreprises et les Canadiens, c'est d'être certain que les gens et les entreprises ont l'appui duquel ils ont besoin et en même temps que la relance économique en général a l'appui des mesures appropriées pour les circonstances économiques. Nous voyons même aujourd'hui que la relance forte et robuste a déjà commencé. Je suis très optimiste, je suis convaincue qu'en juin et août et septembre, on aura une relance très très forte économique. Nous sommes prudentes et pour cette raison, nous pensons que c'est une bonne idée de laisser en place des mesures d'appui pour le début de la relance. Mais jusqu'à maintenant, je pense qu'on voit qu'au fin de septembre, la relance économique doit être très très forte et on n'aura plus du besoin de ces mesures d'appui qui étaient mises en place pour la situation de la pleine pandémie, pour la situation de la confinement économique.
Merci beaucoup. Donc, juste pour préciser, est-ce que, selon Finance Canada et selon le gouvernement, toutes ces aides pandémiques vont se terminer au mois de septembre, quoi qu'il arrive, donc il n'y a pas possibilité de prolonger? Ou si vous pensez qu'il y aurait peut-être une quatrième vague, est-ce que justement le gouvernement serait ouvert à prolonger de nouveau ces programmes-là?
C'est une très bonne question. Et vous avez raison. Dans le budget, dans la loi qui est maintenant adoptée, qui est maintenant entrée en vigueur, le gouvernement a le droit, a les possibilités de continuer les mesures jusqu'à fin du novembre si ce sera nécessaire. Alors, je pense que la pandémie nous a démontré que faire des prognoses certaines est très difficile. Comme vous avez dit, une quatrième vague est possible. Et je pense aussi que c'est important de constater que la relance, que c'est difficile de savoir précisément comment verra la relance. Parce que c'est une nouvelle chose pour nous de fermer l'économie et après ça de la réouvrir. Et par exemple, dans les États-Unis, on a vu que la réouverture, ce n'est pas si facile comme allumer les lumières dans la maison. Ça peut prendre un peu de temps. Alors, le gouvernement a les droits, a toutes les possibilités de continuer les mesures si ce sera nécessaire. Jusqu'à ce moment-là, je suis optimiste et je pense que ce sera possible. Je pense que le plan idéal sera de continuer avec le plan qu'on a présenté aux Canadiens en avril avec le budget. Mais on est prêt à tous les possibilités et c'est une bonne chose. Et on va vraiment observer la relance pendant le mois de juillet pour voir qu'est-ce que l'économie, quels sont les besoins des entreprises, des travailleurs au Canada.
Merci. Prochaine question.
Thank you. Merci. La prochaine question. The next question is from Bill Curry, de Globe and Mail. Please go ahead. Your line is open. Votre ligne est ouverte.
Thank you. My question is for Minister Freeland. Recently in your department, there's been several key officials have left or retired, and this is coming at a time when the department's got to work out a lot of the details of some of the high-level programs that were announced in the budget, like expanded child care and support for small businesses to digitize. So I'd like to get your assessment of the impact of these vacancies on the department and whether it's going to cause any delay in the rollout of programs announced in the budget.
Well, let me start by saying absolutely not. The Finance Department of Canada, I would say, is legendary in Canada and around the world for having a very deep bench, for having an extremely professional team. And I am very, very confident that finance will play its leadership role in rolling out the budget. I also do want to really recognize the enormously valuable role that Michael Sabia, the Deputy Minister of Finance, is playing, the role that he played in pulling together the budget, the role he has been playing in a number of critical issues, and the role he is playing in leading finance in implementing the budget. And you're quite right, Bill. There are a few senior finance people who have recently announced long planned and in some cases long delayed because of the crisis our country has been through retirements. And I do want to just take a moment to pay a personal tribute to just a few of the leaders. I want to say particularly to Andrew Marsland, what a pleasure it has been to work with him. He is a true tax pro and has contributed enormously to our country. I want to say to Richard Botham also, thank you very, very much. I first met him actually when I was trade minister in a meeting that Bill pulled together of finance and trade. And Richard impressed me then, and he's another person who has done tremendous work. And a little bit earlier, Ava Yaskiel also retired, and she's another person who's played a tremendous role. So I'm glad to have the opportunity to really thank these astonishing people. And I just also want to say to the young rising generation of amazing people at finance, you guys, and I mean guys in a gender-neutral way, are all doing a terrific job. You are rising to the challenge, and it's a pleasure to work with you.
I had an update on where things are at with the child care negotiations with the provinces, because that was one of the big announcements from the budget, but some of the provinces seemed a little bit lukewarm that their priorities might be elsewhere.
For sure, early learning and child care is absolutely one of the priorities in the budget. This, for us, is a triple play. It is a measure which boosts economic growth by increasing the participation of women in the labor force. It is a measure which is going to create terrific, well-paid jobs for early learning and childcare educators, and it is so important to have great people doing those jobs and for people to know those jobs are a career. And finally, it is going to be just fantastic for all of the Canadian children who 5 years from now are going to have access to high-quality early learning and childcare across the country that their parents will be able to afford because it will only cost $10 a day. So a total priority, and I see it as a major driver of increased economic growth by increasing women's participation in the labor force. We are extremely focused on this. and working very, very hard with the provinces and territories. Ahmed Hussein is, of course, leading the charge, and Dominic LeBlanc and I are working very, very closely with him, and the Prime Minister is involved too. I am not going to make any specific announcements today, but I'll say to you, Bill, and I want to say to Canadians, we are on the case. It is not going to be a cakewalk. It is going to be complicated to get deals done across the country, but I am very optimistic and confident we are going to get it done because this makes sense. And this is something that Canadians, particularly Canadian women, have waited 50 years for. And this time we're going to get it done.
Thank you. Next question.
Thank you. Merci. La prochaine question. The next question is from Rachel King, CTV News. Please go ahead. Your line is open. Votre ligne est ouverte.
Hi there, it's Rachel Haynes from CTV National News. My question is for Minister Freeland about the passage of the budget bill and a number of other priority bills that you've actually been able to get passed with the support of other parties like the NDP and the Bloc Québécois. However, we're still hearing a lot of hints about an election coming at the end of the summer. Does the government feel like it needs a majority in order to follow through with some of these plans? Why do Canadians need to go to the polls at the end of the summer?
Well, thank you very much, Rachel, for the question. And let me say two things. First of all, I am absolutely thrilled, euphoric, delighted, and I will even say relieved that the budget bill has now been passed. These are measures which are just essential for our country to finish the fight against COVID and to have a strong and fast and robust economic recovery. And, you know, there were a few moments a couple of weeks ago that I felt we were on thin ice, and I am really glad we managed to skate past it and to get the job done. I am, though, really disappointed and I would even say worried that some essential measures haven't been passed. The one that really I've been thinking about a lot is Bill C-6, the one that bans conversion therapy. This is such an important measure. And, you know, I think the vast majority of Canadians know that conversion therapy is a really harmful practice that can leave lifelong damage to people. So I am disappointed is too weak a word that the Senate did not see fit to get this one done. That it's just, this is something that would really help Canadians, and not doing it really hurts a lot of people. So that's the first part of my answer. Second part of my answer, implicit in your question is, there was a question in there about elections, and let me just say, speaking as finance minister, I am laser focused on the economic recovery and on getting Canada back to work. Let's just remember for a minute, our country has been through a really, really difficult experience with the COVID pandemic. People have died. People have lost people that they love very much. People have lost their jobs. People have lost their businesses. But there is now light at the end of the tunnel. We have a lot of vaccines, and Canadians are amazing. You know, I really think that we are seeing today practical evidence of a sort of statistical fact, which is that Canadians are the best educated people in the OECD. And the practical result of that is Canadians are just getting vaccinated really, really fast and with real enthusiasm. And that means there is light at the end of the tunnel for all of us when it comes to COVID. So now our government's job And my personal job is to create the best possible conditions for a strong economic recovery. That's what I'm focused on. And that's a big job. Are there any more questions?
Follow-up. OK. Prochaine question alors. Operator? Operator, can you hear us?
Opérateur, est-ce que vous nous entendez? Est-ce qu'on peut avoir la prochaine question?
Possibly lost the connection with our press corps.
I'm sorry for the interruption. Rachel King, CTV News. Do you have a follow-up question? So the next question, la prochaine question, Terry Kane, BNN Bloomberg. Your line is open. À vous la parole.
Yes, hello. This is a question for Minister Freeland. Yesterday on our channel, the head of a Canadian pet food company said people he's hiring don't show up to work or quit after a day or two. He blames what he sees as over-generous federal support programs. What's your response to that?
My response is to say I absolutely disagree with the idea that the essential support our government has provided to Canadian workers through COVID was unnecessary. I think it's important for all of us to remember that COVID caused the deepest recession since the Great Depression. Millions of people lost their job through no fault of their own. And our government very quickly came to the view that we were not going to leave those people behind. We were not going to have families kicked out of their homes or have kids not have enough to eat because their parents got laid off because the country went into lockdown. That was absolutely the right thing to do. I am really proud that our government made that decision. And to all the Canadians, hardworking people who lost their jobs through no fault of their own, I want to say to you, I'm glad we were able to support you. Let me also say that a group of Canadians who this budget is stepping up to support is people who work really hard and don't earn very much money. It is a sad reality that in Canada today, you can have a full-time job earning the minimum wage and still live in poverty. I think what we need to do is encourage Canadians to get a job. And that's exactly what the Canada Worker Benefit Top-Up does. This is a benefit that says we know you're working hard and we know it is still really hard for you to make ends meet. And so we're going to recognize that hard work and top up your income. That is a policy which is progressive. It is a policy which is going to drive labor force participation. It's a policy which is going to drive economic growth. And that's why I was really glad to highlight it today.
Follow-up?
Okay, so you mentioned the CWB. Are there any other steps the government is taking to get people off of support programs and back contributing to the economy?
I think one of the measures which is the most important in the budget when it comes to the restart of our economy and what I think is going to be a very fast and robust economic comeback is the Canada Recovery Hiring Credit. This is a measure which has been designed to support Canadian businesses, especially Canadian small businesses, as they take that essential, but I think really hard and really brave decision to reopen as the economy reopens. I am confident that there is a huge amount of economic opportunity out there, but businesses, especially small businesses, have been through a very, very volatile time, and it's scary. It feels risky to hire new workers or to give your current workers more hours. And it costs money to do that. And that's why we've put the Canada Recovery Hiring Benefit in place. It runs from June 6th to November. I consider it sort of a helping hand to help small businesses really get back into the game and be part of this recovery with Canada coming roaring back. And I'd like to encourage all small businesses who are listening, take a look at this benefit. It will really, really support you as you hire new workers or give your existing workers more hours, or even if you've had to maybe cut salaries to get through the pandemic, it will support you if you want to raise the wages that you're paying.
Merci. Prochaine question.
Merci. Thank you. Our next question, la prochaine question, Greg Quinn, Market News International, pardon. Your line is open. À vous la parole.
Good morning. There's one job vacancy I was curious about is the Bank of Canada has been without its senior deputy since the first week of December. The existing council is all white men. As a minister, you would have to approve or recommend a candidate from the board of directors. Are you nudging them to make a decision both to help with the management of the economy and to help out with the diversity of people overseeing the recovery?
That's a very good question. And let me start by saying that this issue of diversity at the Bank of Canada is something Tiff and I have discussed often. I know it's something that he really, really cares about and is really focused on. When it comes to getting a senior deputy governor in place, that is a really, really important job, and it is important to get a really terrific person in that role. And I'm not going to make any announcements today, but let me just say a lot of hard work has been done there, and I am enthusiastic about the work that has been done.
Follow-up question?
There is no follow-up. Next question, la prochaine question, Mercedes Stephenson, Global News. Your line is open. À vous la parole.
Hi, Deputy Prime Minister Freeland. Thank you for taking my question. My question for you today is about the decision to reinstate Vice Admiral Craig Baines as the commander of the Navy. He has apologized for the golf game with General Rouleau and General Vance. He initially described going on that golf game as a public show of support for General Vance. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on the decision to keep him as the head of the Navy. I know that is the Chief of the Defense Staff's decision, but as the Deputy Prime Minister and as a woman who has been in many fields where you have to face the kind of challenges that women in the armed forces are facing, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, thank you for the question. And, Mercedes, I'll start by saying I am loath to suggest that I have personally ever faced the kinds of challenges that the brave women in uniform who serve Canada have faced. I respect them very, very much, and I honor their service. And I know, and I think every single woman in Canada knows, after the revelations of recent months, that Canadian women in uniform work in a toxic culture. They work in a toxic system which must be changed. You pointed out quite rightly the institutional place where these personnel decisions are made, but you asked me to respond as a Canadian woman. And I will do that. And I'll say I was surprised and disturbed by the decision. And my immediate thought was, how would I feel if I were a Canadian woman in the armed forces? And what would that decision tell me about how seriously my bosses were taking the essential work of transforming the culture of the Canadian Armed Forces? And I don't think if I were wearing a uniform today, I would be reassured by that decision.
I also wanted to ask you your thoughts on, we're now almost 6 months into the coverage of the sexual misconduct problems, and some call it a scandal in the Canadian Armed Forces. We still don't have any recommendations yet from Louise Arbour, although, of course, she just began her work recently. There haven't been any updates from the military police on what's happening. And I hear from a lot of troops who are wondering what's going on and whether there's actually progress that is really being made.
I think it's absolutely fair for you to pose that question, and even more so for people in the Canadian Armed Forces to be asking that question. I think that people, especially women, want action, and they want change, and they deserve action, and they deserve change. There is money in the budget to work on this, and now that the budget has been passed, those funds are available. That's a really good thing. And I do want to say, you mentioned Louise Arbour, so let me just say I worked with her directly as foreign minister. She is smart. She is tough. She does not pull her punches. And I have a lot of confidence that she will be one of the people who helps drive the real transformation that we need.
Thank you. We will take one last question from Rachel Haynes from CTV, who did not get her follow-up. Nous allons prendre une dernière question de Rachel Haynes de CTV, qui n'a pas eu sa question en suivi.
Hi, Minister. Can you hear me now? Hopefully.
Hey, it's such a, let me just say, Rachel, I want to offer you a little bit of sympathy for communications problems in what is still the age of COVID, although let's hope these are the dog days of the age of COVID and it soon ends. So as a former reporter, I have sympathy with your plight, and I'm happy to hear your follow-up.
Well, thank you so much, and I'm glad for the moderator and operators for being able to get back to me. So thanks all around. So my follow-up was just to go back to Bill C-6, as you mentioned about it being an important piece of legislation now in the Senate, that it did not pass. However, the Senate did say they want to study it further in committee. If there is an election right now, it would be at the call of the Liberal government, because since Parliament isn't sitting, no one else can trigger it. So would your government commit to waiting until this bill actually passes through the Senate before calling an election where it would then die?
Again, Rachel, I would like ever so respectfully to challenge the implicit premise of your question. And that is a notion that our government today is focused on anything other than the once-in-a-generation effort to finish the fight against COVID and to drive a very, very powerful, robust, and inclusive economic comeback. That's a really big job. We have been through a once-in-a-generation traumatic experience. I think as the dust settles, we as Canadians are going to take stock of how we got through this. I think we're going to look around at the rest of the world, and without in any way being self-congratulatory, because that is not the Canadian way, I think we're going to be able to say, you know what, we did okay. We supported each other, and we got through this together. And what we need to do now, the sort of last chapter of COVID, is finish that fight, get vaccinated. If you don't have your first dose, please go out and get it. And if you have your first dose, please get your second dose of vaccine. And then what we as a government need to do is really be thoughtful and careful in providing just the right amount of support that Canadian workers and Canadian businesses need to have a strong, robust, inclusive, and lasting recovery. I do not underrate for a moment the complexity of that task. I am so glad the budget has been passed, because that gives us as a government the tools we need to drive that recovery. And I also have the humility to realize that at the end of the day, the reason I'm optimistic that we are going to have a fantastically strong economic recovery is because I believe in Canadians. Canadians have been so resilient. They have been so thoughtful. They have been so sensible. And they have been so decent to one another through COVID. I have just endless confidence that those same qualities are going to be the ones that power a summer during which Canada comes roaring back. And I want to say to all the Canadians who are part of that roaring, that the government and the ministers here, the Ministry of Finance, we're all going to be there for you to provide whatever support you need, whatever support we can provide.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister and Ministers. That concludes today's press conference. Ceci met fin à la conférence de presse d'aujourd'hui. Merci.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Merci.